Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the full moon in the second decan of Aries. Hope you're having a wonderful Friday afternoon out there. We're going to be talking about all of the little details around the full moon. We're going to be talking about the sun moving through the second 10-degree section of Libra, opposing the moon in the second 10-degree section of Aries. We're going to break down the host of the moon, Mars and Scorpio. Then we're going to help you unfold this cycle, like this lunar cycle, with all of the different aspects that are going to be happening, not only a little bit before, but for about a week or two afterwards, so you can kind of see how this is going to unfold within your life and make some plans. So if you are joining me here today, please leave me a comment in the chat. Let me know where you're stopping in from, and I will welcome you in here. Before we do that, I've got a few announcements. So you can find me over at spencermichaud.com. I have all sorts of offerings, readings, classes, etc. And I would love to work with you. So go over to spencermichaud.com, click on the Book Now button, and you can see all the different offerings I have. I have different readings for natal readings, transit readings, tutoring sessions. We also have some exciting classes that are coming up in the next week or so. One of which is my Decan Walk. So my Decan Walk 25-26 is going to be starting Monday, October the 6th. I would love for you to join me for that. This is a session that we do that is a yearly, basically a yearly journey through the zodiac, through the decans. We create community through doing astrology, divination. We learn astrology, tarot, mythology, through what I like to call collaborative storytelling. So we're sharing each other's stories, witnessing each other's journeys in a good container, a supportive environment. We're going to be connecting the decanic language, tarot cards, etc., while people are telling their stories. So it's an experiential type of class. So we're going to be connecting through seeing these transits play out through each other's lives, which is so valuable, because sometimes we can see these things through our own perspective and lenses, but to really get to the essence and the core of these symbols, seeing how it plays out in multiple charts and multiple lives over a long period of time, can be extremely valuable. And I've done this. This is going to be my third year in a row doing this, and we've had some amazing insights, and we've made some great friends along the way. So Decans, powerful storytelling tools, dividing the zodiac into 36 faces or 10-degree sections. They syncretize with the tarot. Each has their own planetary ruler and spirit associated with it. We're going to talk about a few of them today. Some more details with the Decan Walk. We're going to be having 2 live monthly webinar sessions each month on the first and third Monday of the month. We've got a private members-only Discord group, workbooks, PDF workbooks, Decan flashcards, special downloads, access to over 30 hours of pre-recorded Decanic webinars that I've done in the past for each of the 36 Decans. You get PDFs of all the webinar slides. It's going to be great. And if you need some help financially, reach out. There's payment plans. There are some limited sliding scale things available too. I just would love for you to be able to participate. And in that spirit, there is a free Decan Walk open house that I'm going to be hosting, the second Decan Walk open house that I'm going to be hosting on this coming Monday, the time that we would normally meet for class, September the 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. We had one a few weeks ago that was awesome. We had some really amazing people that stopped in. We talked about how class would normally function. We talked about the decans of the moment. We did some chart reading. And everyone that signs up gets a code for a free Decan webinar of your choice. So I hope that you'll join me for that. It's a good way for us to get to know each other and see if this is the right fit for you. I would love for you to join us for that. And you can sign up with the link that's in the chat for this video or in the description of wherever you're consuming this podcast. You can also go to my website, spencermichaud.com, click on the Book Now button, and find the open house as well. So that's our Decan Walk open house, Monday, the 29th of September, 2 p.m. Eastern. I also have a beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews, who has a magical business called Third Coast Mojo. And she is constantly making new stuff, putting it up there for you to be able to mitigate any challenging placements you might have in your chart or bring you some magical goodness into your life. It is getting close to Scorpio season. We have Mars and Scorpio as we are recording this. And we have this beautiful fiery wall of protection. That's a Mars and Scorpio election. Here you can see one of the salts and powders and herbs that went into it. There's also oils and whatnot. Really good stuff. Great for protecting your home or driving away anything that you don't want around, or severing or separating from a situation that's too sticky or enclosed, and returning it back to the earth to liberate your spirit to find a new, I don't know, a new vehicle, I guess you could say. We'll talk about that today too. So go visit her over at Third Coast Mojo on Etsy. I also have a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to, so you can know when we're going to be going live, when we're going to be launching classes. There's discount codes. There's all sorts of things to keep you up to date. That's the best way to stay up to date with everything. Spencer Michaud, astrology, etc. So I hope that you will sign up for that. There's a link in the description here. And then finally, if you want to support the work I'm doing today, you can buy a super chat while I'm live here on YouTube, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com and become a patron of the channel by using that website. It's a great way to support what we're doing here, to help us to keep the lights on, keep doing the work that we're doing, buying the gift of time to do all this research and to prepare these broadcasts each week and all of the elements that go into it. I so appreciate all of you who are able to donate in that way. Yeah, easiest thing to do, even if you're struggling financially right now, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, the video, spread the word. Word of mouth is awesome. But yes, appreciate all of your support. And yeah, that's the end of our announcements here. We got through them. So I'm going to welcome a few friends here. Let's see who's stopping in today. Javiera is here, says hello. Hope everyone is doing awesome. Hope you're doing well, Javiera. Joining us, I believe, from Ontario via South America, and kind of going on this journey with us here. It's lovely to see you in the chat here today. Practical Astros is here. Says, hey, Spencer, it's Krista from Asheville. Glad to catch the live. Nice to see you, Krista. Hope everything's going well for you over there in North Carolina. I saw your beautiful Instagram. Everybody go follow Krista, Practical Astros. She's got some really great stuff going on there. So thanks for joining us today, and thank you for the kind words that you sent in the last few days. I really appreciate that. So welcome, friend. Rachel Olode is here. Says, good to be here from a beautiful Irish autumn evening, Spencer. Oh, I love to hear that, Rachel. We're getting the leaves starting to change colors here in the States as well. And you can feel the chill starting to come in the air. I love the fall. I'm a sort of a, I don't know, I take life at a little bit of a slower pace. So when things start to go into like the internal part of the year where we're letting go and we're reflecting and we're slowing down, I mean, I feel like I'm in my wheelhouse there. So lovely to see you here, Rachel. K-Wow is here. What's up, K-Wow? Nice to see you. Hope everything's going well your way, my friend. All right. Devin Malone, Rev Dev Malone is here. I love the new moniker there, Devin. Says, happy Venus Day. Nice to see you, friend. I like this is a cool profile picture, Devin. Is that from Burning Man? It looks like a Burning Man pic, if I'm not mistaken. So welcome, friend. Hope everything's going well your way. And yeah, happy Libra season. All right, friends. So we're talking about this full moon in Aries II today. So, of course, full moons, opposite sun and moon. We are in the middle of Libra season. We just went through our autumnal equinox, the beginning of fall in the northern hemisphere. We have transitioned from the light part of the year to the dark part of the year, where the days were equal, but then start to become shorter and shorter and shorter. The light becomes shorter, the darkness becomes longer. We sort of have a transition from, I guess you could almost call it a solar part of the year to a Saturnian part of the year, where we're thinking about our limitations. We're thinking about consolidation. We're going internal. Things are starting to hibernate. We're starting to try to seek the balance and analyze the actions that we took over the course of the past seasons and see, hey, what did we do well? What did we need to improve? How do we restore equilibrium after a period of growth? How do we consolidate all that abundance and store it for the winter? All of these questions are starting to come up. So this full moon in Aries is going to be on the 6th of October, which incidentally, friends, is the first day of Decan Walk 25-26. So we're going to be starting Decan Walk with the full moon in Aries too. It'll be wonderful. We have an awesome group that is signed up, and I would love for you to be able to join us. But 14 degrees Aries, interesting place. There's an important fixed star we're going to be talking about here today. But what I'd like to do is I'm going to take it detail by detail, okay? And I'm going to kind of unfold it through, we're going to look at the sun first. I always like when we have full moons, I love looking at the sun first because the sun is infusing light, meaning, and purpose into the container or the body that is the moon. And we're trying to reconcile these opposite forces. So understanding what the sun is trying to infuse into its sort of opposing body is, I think, really important and can help us to understand these full moons in much greater detail. So we're going to start with the sun in the second decan of Libra. So what we'll look at here is I'm going to show you one of my Decan flashcards. So this is a Decan flashcard where you can see the tarot card associated with the second decan of Libra. Here we have the Three of Swords, which is sometimes a card that people are a little bit nervous about when they get in the tarot, but there are some secret significations to it that aren't necessarily as ominous as it may appear at first. We've got a heart pierced by three swords with storm clouds in the background. This is a very Saturnian decan that the sun is going to be moving through. And of course, the sun is in its fall by essential dignity in Libra. So this is a place where it is not the strongest. And because we talked about the Saturnian part of the year starting to take power, take precedence, this is a very Saturnine decan. And the sun may have a little bit of a struggle on the struggle bus during this period of time because we're not necessarily as concerned with growth, vitality, etc. We're sort of thinking about contraction. We're thinking about how can we slow down? How can we think about what's best for everyone involved rather than just the individual? So probably one of the most Saturnine decans in the 36 faces. And here we have the Book of Thoth and Book T calling it the Lord of Sorrow. You can probably understand why with the visuals that we see here. Austin Coppock calls it two links of a chain. We have a spirit in this decan called Kairos, but interestingly enough, some of the Decanic authors, including Austin Coppock and I believe Susie Chang touches on this too in 36 Secrets, talk about maybe a little bit of an adjustment because we have two spirits, one that Kairos sort of has dominion over, or two decans that Kairos has dominion over, Scorpio 3 and Libra 2. And I would say that the Scorpio 3 understanding of Kairos seems to make a lot more sense as far as the themes of that decan. We can talk about that in a minute, but Austin offers Horkos as an alternative for this decan, who is a god or embodiment of oaths and contracts. So the thing we might be trying to understand when Sun is moving through Libra 2, and as I'm recording this, Sun's moving through Libra 1, so we may be identifying imbalances through Libra 1, and then beginning to understand how to make negotiations in Libra 2, how can we see things from someone else's perspective? How can we make adjustments? What kind of agreements do we need to make with other people? Back in ancient civilizations, not everyone knew how to write. So your word was very important. And sometimes if you broke your word or your handshake agreement, that was something that was punishable by death. So we have to be very careful of the promises that we make when the sun is in Libra 2. We have to try to find solutions that are win-win solutions when the sun is in Libra 2. We have some fixed stars in this decan, one of which, Vindematrix, at about 10 or 11 degrees of Libra, is associated with some sorrow, with maybe the loss of a partner or the loss of something that was dear to us. It's also the grape gatherer, so we might be gathering important information as well. Algorab is interesting at 13 degrees of Libra because Algorab is a fixed star associated with a crow named Corvus that gets distracted from his task through earthly delights, through shiny things. And this might also be something to think about with this full moon, is we may have a lot of things that come up as distractions that aren't necessarily the most important things that we're dealing or that we need to deal with. And they may be pulling us away from our most important tasks. And how do we become, I guess, disciplined enough to set them aside and not engage with those distractions so that we can focus on the things that are most important to us? So I've been experiencing this a lot in the last week or two. Just a lot of people have been coming to me with a lot of distractions, conflicts, etc., that may be pulling them away from some of their most important tasks. And I've felt this myself a little bit too. So as we move forward into the full moon here, those energies might get a little bit stronger. We might start feeling them a little bit more intensely. Okay, so the host of this particular solar energy is going to be Venus at 21 degrees of Virgo. So we talked about this quite a bit in the last few broadcasts, Virgo 3, especially when we talked about the eclipse that was happening in Virgo 3. And Venus is in its fall in this particular place. So we have the sun in its fall at the bottom of the Wheel of Fortune, is what some of the ancient authors would compare that dignity being. And Venus is also in a difficult position. So when we have both the sun, the source of our vitality, the source of our clarity, the source of our individuation, of our feeling hopeful and our spirit in its fall, and Venus, the planet that's associated with harmonizing, with helping us to find win-win situations, with helping us to blend two different perspectives together, bring things together to attract things. When that planet is also in its fall, we may be having some difficult negotiations. We may be having some difficulties coming to terms with what could work for both parties. And then when we get to the lunar part of this, that throws another wrench into it. But Venus in this decan, I would say, is trying to keep something together in a sign and in a face, a part of that sign that is known for trying to separate things into categories, trying to figure out what stays and what goes, what needs to be preserved against the ravages of time, and what needs to be returned back to the earth. So Venus struggles here a little bit. Venus sometimes will try to bring something together that is past its prime, past its time. And that can be frustrating because we're trying to, I don't know, put lipstick on the corpse, I guess you could say. A little twist on that turn of phrase, right? Austin Coppock calls this decan the sarcophagus. So, preservation of a body against decay, sort of like the pharaohs and the kings of ancient Egypt. Okay, so that's sort of our solar condition. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start talking about the moon. I'm going to check in with the chat here. Let's see. Rachel says, I'm in the slower lane with you, Spencer. I love the way autumn encourages us to turn inward again and appreciate life on a deeper level. Absolutely. Yeah, slowing down is going to be the theme of this broadcast today, and also the advice that all of the divination has been giving us. There's multiple things that came up that talk about slowing down, especially when we're in a full moon that's usually associated with just doing things and asking questions later, and with speed. The fixed star is associated with speed. So yeah, learning to slow down is an important lesson. K-Wow says, I love Asheville. We'll definitely check out Practical Astros. I'm in Raleigh. Nice. Maybe we can make a connection with the two of you there. Javier says, I'm stoked for this talk. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome, Javier. I really appreciate you showing up each week. Thank you for that. I totally appreciate that. And it's always nice to see familiar faces in the chat. Devin says, sure is. Burning Man was great. That's the temple in the background. Bringing a temple guardian was the big part of my grief. The temple is where people bring things to burn to help process grief. Ooh, I like that. Yeah, we sometimes have difficulty in our modern Western civilization with processing grief. And I think that's been one of the real benefits of learning things like astrology is understanding that is a healthy and normal part of our experience. And we even get sort of roadmaps for experiencing grief through the language of astrology, especially through the signs of both Libra, Scorpio, and Virgo on some level. So yeah, really, really important to bring those types of energies into our lives, to bring balance back to our lives. Amir says, those books on the Decans are so expensive. I would recommend starting with Susie Chang's 36 Secrets. That one's probably a reasonable amount of money. 36 Faces is out of print right now, but should be re-released at some point. But I don't know if I would necessarily pay the secondhand market for those. I was very, very fortunate to receive this book right at the end of its availability. And but I try to infuse a lot of this work into. I'm very, very grateful for Austin and Susie Chang's excellent scholarship on this, and I try to I don't know, add something to the conversation, but honor their legacy with the work that I do as well. Javier says flowers at a grave type of thing. There you go. I like that. Javier says, I also heard it as fixing broken vases with gold. Ooh, I like that. I like that too. Yeah. Thanks, Javier. Javier is saying, I love your book knowledge, Spencer. I love books. So I will always have book recommendations for all of you. And hopefully I'll be able to guide you to the right information. So yes, thank you, friend. Okay. So we've talked about the sun in Libra. We talked about its host, Venus. Now it's in aversion. So that means that it's in a place that the sun can't witness. So it has even more difficulty getting the resources that it needs. So the sun is going to be at a fairly large disadvantage during this full moon. So solar types of significations may be more difficult to come by. Now the moon is in Aries II. So with the moon in Aries II, Austin, Devin's got a nice comment here. It says Austin has Jupiter at the end of Cancer, so I'm sure it's going to come out within a year. Nice. Yeah, so maybe he'll have a Jupiter return releasing the second edition of his book, Austin is Devin's postulating. I could very well see that. Andrea, 54 Hector is here, subscriber, my spiritual brother and family. Nice to see you, Andrea. Welcome, my friend. Okay, so we're talking about the moon part of this full moon now. So the moon in Aries II. Let's bring up the Decan flashcard associated with this. Okay, so here is Aries II, and here we see the Three of Wands, the kind of the opposite suit to the swords, right? We have wands and swords sort of with opposite astrological signs, with the fire and the air signs. So here we have a solar decan in a martial sign. So here is our ability to shine our light, right? To show our virtue, right? Book of Thoth calls it the Lord of Virtue. Book T calls it established strength. In the aforementioned 36 Faces by Austin Coppock, he names it the crown because it is a very solar decan. This is where the decan where the sun has its exaltation. So we might have the physical sun in the sky in a place where it's very weak, but the moon is in a place where the sun would be very strong. If we think about how we might be able to have a strong lunar consciousness that is solar in nature, we might be expressing some pretty strong feelings, right? We may be expressing our intuition. Maybe it's not rational. Maybe we're talking about our virtues and our beliefs in a very emotional way that is not necessarily rational. Now we have a daimon in this decan called Persephone. So of course Persephone was the maiden that was sort of abducted into the underworld by Hades and then became the queen of the underworld. So there's a lot of springtime energy associated with this, even though we are in fall. And we have some fixed stars that we'll talk about today, specifically Alpheretz at 14 degrees of Aries, which is in the constellation of Cassiopeia, I believe. Andromeda, excuse me. Cassiopeia is the queen. Andromeda is the princess. So this is a fixed star in the constellation associated with the royal family, with the princess. There is some damsel in distress energy that we see in some of the fixed star authors, but also the main thing with this is speed, like doing things quickly. We'll talk about Pegasus, which was more of an older way of envisioning that constellation before we even had that royal family superimposed on top of it. All right, so let's take a look at that Alpheretz energy, right? Let's talk a little bit about this decan. So royalty, personal sovereignty, establishing your character, your values, benevolent rulership, like being able to lead in a way that is in service of the people that you are trying to lead. One of the themes that comes up with this decan quite a bit is the creation of your own world or your own values to live within a world of your own creation rather than one that is created for you, right? So we are trying to come to terms with balancing our own needs and our own obligations with the sun in a Saturnine decan of Libra, with our own need to create something that'll work for us, right? For us as individuals. So a couple questions you could ask yourself specifically about the Aries II moon. How can you clarify and announce your values? How will you rule and serve whatever territory you want to create with dignity, with grace, instead of with a authoritarian hammer, right? Where can you establish independence and self-governance? There may be some changes with our contractual agreements around this full moon. We may be questioning some of the binding agreements and oaths and contracts that we have with people, especially when we talk about the host Mars in Scorpio 2, the second decan of Scorpio, where we have to kind of start asking whether the things that are the exchanges that we have, where we're distilling each other's energy, exchanging, are they poisons or are they boons, right? Are they things that help us or are they things that are taking away from us? So we're going to have to ask a lot of those questions moving forward. Where do you make your own rules, right? When a lot of the solar focus is on shared values, how can you put your own light of consciousness into that? How can you be true to yourself and your integrity while you are making an agreement with someone else? What skill set does healthy leadership require? That's an excellent question to ask in these times. We have had a lot of examples of unhealthy leadership recently. We've had a lot of authoritarianism that has sprouted up in various parts of the world. We have had some pushback on that, I'm happy to say. We've talked on this channel about Pluto out of bounds in its southern declination, which is basically just a fancy way of saying that Pluto is in a place where we may be starting to see power returning to the people and pushing back against corruption in leadership. We saw that a little bit this week with the pushback against the censorship of free speech in America. And finally, how can you take responsibility for your own power? So what do we do? How do we learn about healthy leadership? I think healthy leadership is service, right? Healthy leadership is composure. When we stay composed, when we stay centered, when we stay balanced, when we ask questions of how to be of service to others rather than making decrees all the time, we can learn what people actually need, and then we can provide that for them rather than only coming from a place of selfish desire. It's important. It's not something that we often practice in Western civilization. There is kind of a little bit of a narcissistic me culture that is infused with popular culture in the West. It doesn't mean that that's everybody, and that doesn't mean that that's happening on our local levels, but in the grand scheme, we exalt people that are a little bit, at least lately, that I feel like are coming from a more selfish perspective. So how do we restore balance to that and see how we can serve each other? So that taking responsibility for our power, that great, this is the Spider-Man thing, right? With great power comes great responsibility. And when we're given positions of leadership, we have to become worthy of that. And what does that mean? I think it means not lashing out, not trying to get revenge on your enemies, trying to spread kindness and acceptance and tolerance. All of those things can make for great leadership. Yes, there will be some tough questions that have to be answered and the tough decisions that have to be made. But when you can do those from a place of love rather than from a place of hate or vindictiveness, that to me is the type of benevolent rulership that we so sorely are in need of in these times. Now, Alpharets. Let's talk about that fixed star a little bit. Let me check in with our chat here. Let's see. Javier says, I'm worried about all this. I watched a fascinating video last night about how everything that's happening is only separating more people through the use of human behavior. Yeah, we live in a divisive time. We live in a time where having meaningful discussions and conversations with people that we disagree with is becoming harder and harder and more polarized. So if you see that happening in your communities, how can you take an action that will be the opposite of that, through trying to listen to people, to trying to see things through multiple perspectives and through other people's eyes, and then try to find a solution that is fair, not just for yourself, but for the other person. That doesn't mean that we have to have negative boundaries, right? We need to have healthy boundaries when we're having these types of negotiations and things like that too. And sometimes there will be consequences if people fall short of their integrity. But I think that on some level, we get to be the change that we want to see, instead of being completely consumed by the examples that we have out in the world right now, right? We don't necessarily have to be like them. I think if that makes sense. Like, it's a radical act to try to listen and to try to find solutions in kindness and in grace. That's a radical act in these times. And I think that if you want to be a revolutionary, that's a good place to start. All right. So Alpharets, let's talk about that fixed star a little bit more. So Alpharets is in the constellation Andromeda. Sorry for misspeaking earlier. Andromeda was the daughter of the king, right? And we had this royal family, Cassiopeia, Andromeda. I believe Perseus is near this collection of constellations. And this has some associations in Bernadette Brady's great work on fixed stars, amongst others, of damsel in distress energy, sort of like, if you remember that 80s movie, oh geez, what was it called? It had Harry Hamlin in it, Clash of the Titans. We had Andromeda being chained to a rock and sort of being sacrificed to the Kraken. So there may be some feelings of being sacrificed to some greater force that we have difficulty controlling. But this also used to be a fixed star that overlapped in the constellation of Pegasus. And a lot of significations with Pegasus are, speed, freedom, independence. Also, the fight or flight response with this fixed star. How do we work under pressure? So this may help us to work well under pressure, especially if we're feeling some adrenaline rush. You may be more inclined to take risks when the moon is conjoining Alpharets. So how do we balance out the rashness, the speed element, the risk-taking desires with the needs of the season, which are slowing down, seeing things from multiple perspectives, being able to make an informed decision before pressing the go button, right? So something to keep in mind with that fixed star as well. Okay, let's move on to the host of the moon. So a important technique with Hellenistic astrology is seeing the guest-host relationship. So not only is the moon in a certain sign in the zodiac, but there is a planet that's responsible for providing resources, for providing topical information to that planet. In this case, it's Mars. So Mars is at 10 degrees of Scorpio at the full moon, and it is also in aversion to the moon, but it does have a secret line of communication with the moon with a Hellenistic technique called like-ingirding. And like-ingirding is a term that refers to a planet hosting from another sign that it also rules. So because Scorpio is in its own sign and also rules Aries, so it rules Scorpio and Aries in traditional astrology, there is this secret line of communication between them. Now, we talked about the sun being in its fall and its ruler, Venus, also being in its fall. In this case, Mars is in its domicile and very strong in Scorpio. So to me, when those planets are dignified, I think that the significations associated with them may take a little bit more precedence. Or if we align ourselves with those energies, we might have a more successful outcome, because those planets are sort of in the spotlight right now. And when Mars is in Scorpio too, here we see the Six of Cups associated with this decan. It's a solar decan in the sign ruled by Mars. Book T and Book of Thoth call it the Lord of Pleasure. Austin Coppock calls it mutual distillation, which talks about the exchanges of energy that we have with other people that can either be beneficial or can be toxic. Susie Chang talks a lot about sepia tones in her book 36 Secrets with this card, the Six of Cups, because we are looking back fondly in like the golden hour. I guess that's the name for this Decan in her book. We're looking fondly upon the past. Like this image might be one of a memory or a photograph where we are looking back with the pain of return. Nostalgia means the pain of return. So there may be some things that we're looking back fondly upon with nostalgia, with a little bit of bittersweetness potentially at this full moon. And we're probably trying to understand how we are intermeshed with other people and whether that's healthy or whether we need to sever some of those ties that keep us enmeshed with other people in an unhealthy way, so that we can individuate, so we can be true to our own values and our own integrity. So this is an important full moon for maybe revisiting a little bit of the past so you can learn from it, distill all of the essence out of the form that is needing to be released. Because Scorpio is a great place for letting go of old forms. Mars, as the ruler of Scorpio, is amazing at severing and separating. So Mars has that severing and separating quality both in Aries and in Scorpio. So in Aries, we're severing and separating from the collective, the spirit from the collective, to individuate as an individual point of consciousness, and then eventually take that consciousness and infuse it into a body in Taurus, combining consciousness and body. In Scorpio, we have this realization that the form is kind of spent. Like when we look around in our northern hemisphere during the fall, and in Scorpio season in particular, things are starting to decay. The forms that brought the fruits of summer are now starting to rot. And that's okay, because that rot is going to provide the nutrients in the soil for the next cycle. We have to return those rotting fruits, those rotting leaves to the earth. Leave the leaves, right? If you're a native pollinator habitat, I guess convert such as myself, you don't bag these leaves up and just stick them in a landfill. You leave them in your soil because that's what provides the nutrients for the trees, for the plants, for the animals and the insects that create a healthy ecosystem. So what we're doing is we're severing a point of consciousness from a body that is no longer vital. And then we are returning the form to the earth. And then we are liberating the spirit and the essence that animated that form to find something new. Now, if you try to keep eating fruits well into Scorpio season that are, let's say you've got I don't know, an apple tree, okay, in the back of your house or something like that, or a fruit tree, peaches, berries, etc. If you try to eat those fruits after the point where they're starting to rot, to mold, etc., they will make you sick. They will not be providing the type of nutrition that you need for a healthy body. So you have to know when to let go. And you may be looking at that tree, and you may be looking at that peach tree. Let's say it's a peach tree. I love peaches. And you've still got a few that are hanging left on the branch. And you go back and you remember, wow, I remember when all of every single branch was just full of ripe, juicy peaches. I remember biting into the juiciest peach, right? It was so delicious. I wish it could be that way. And then you pick one from the branch and it's full of worms and it's all wrinkly and like disgusting. It smells like fermented, like a wine of some sort. And you're like, I don't want to eat this. This isn't going to taste good. This is going to make me sick. The best thing you can do with that peach is you can put it back into the ground. Maybe one of those peach pits will become a new tree. Maybe the rotting flesh will become the nutrients that are going to feed the next cycle and feed the seeds of the next cycle to come. Maybe that return to the earth will feed the tree that will make more peaches. But you have to let it go. And if you hang on to it too long and you say, I'm going to take this rotting peach and I'm going to try to protect it, and it's my little Roddy peach. I'm called Roddy. Hey, Roddy, I'm going to protect you. Like, you just try to keep it alive. You pump it full of, like, I don't know, who knows what, who God knows what, to keep it plump. I mean, we do this all the time with, like people in Hollywood are injecting all sorts of garbage into their bodies, into their faces to keep themselves plump like a ripe peach. And eventually it can turn into a grotesque caricature, all because of not accepting the need to embrace the cycles of change, embrace the cycles of letting go, to embrace the wisdom that comes with the lines on our face, right? Embrace the wisdom that comes with transitioning into a new stage of life. And maybe that stage of life isn't, quote unquote, as fertile as a stage of life previously, but there is wisdom to be gained from living through it nonetheless. So some really important themes coming up with the Scorpio Mars, really poignant symbolism. And we're going to be seeing a number of these planets moving through Scorpio and making trines with Jupiter and with Saturn and with Neptune, grand water trines coming up. So our letting go process is going to be smoothed out by Jupiter. It's going to help us to come to terms with things with Saturn. All right, I'm going to check in with the chat here, see where we're at with everybody, how this is landing for all of you. Oh, let's see. I'm going to go back a little bit here. Let's see. Javier has got some good comments. I'm just reading through some things here. Javier says, I had a kitty named Percival for 16 plus years. Perseus, the name reminded me. Oh, that's cool. Percival is also known as the knight that pursued the Grail in the Grail myth, right? Sounds very close to Perseus. Maybe there's some overlap there. Javier says, wow, I didn't think this would be the card. Well, we're full of surprises here with the Decanic Astrology. Devin says, Scorpio too. It's okay to be nostalgic. Don't get stuck in the past. I like that. Absolutely. Going back and having good memories is important. Like, a lot of our experiences as we get older, we're going to have less new experiences sometimes, just from our bodies starting to slow down and maybe not being able to get out and do as many things as we may have been able to at one point in our life. Sometimes those memories fuel us, and it's important to make those, and it's okay to revisit them sometime. But like you said, Devin, not getting stuck in them is the key. Yeah. Go back and forth like Hermes, Javier says. Yes. Javier says, this is reminding me of the season finale of Sweet Tooth, if anyone has seen that Netflix show. I'll have to check that out. It looks pretty cool. It's the little deer boy, right? I guess that's the only thing I'm thinking of with that. Javier says, wow, Spencer even said when to let it go. Actually reminds me of the new Alien as well. That's the concept of letting go of the object so your hand can come out of the hole. Ooh, I like that. Yes. Practical Astro says, my precious. Yes, right. Yeah, we see this in the sort of in the Lord of the Rings too, right? With Gollum hanging on to the ring, far beyond his time, and it actually extends his life. And you could see how sort of corrupted he's become by trying to hang on so tightly to something in the past. And sometimes if he had just let go, he might have found some peace within that. Oh, good. We've been seeing synchronicities here. The knight, love the lore. Yes, there we go. Marianic. This is a new I think this is a new username. Mariana, potentially. Nice to see you, friend. Marianic. There's a lot of N's in that one. Oh, yeah. Practical Astro says, my precious, the rotten peach. Yes, exactly. Yeah, trying to hang on to that rotten peach for so long. I mean, it's human nature to do so. Krista, I think that when we experience something that brings us pleasure and brings us joy, we want those feelings to continue. When we experience things that make us sad or make us angry or make us feel negative emotions, we want to avoid those things. So I would much rather eat a delicious ripe peach, right, than a rotten one. But you have to know when to hold them and when to fold them, right? You have to know when that fruit is past its prime. I mean, the other thing too is there's different delights you can have in different seasons. If we hang on too tightly to the rotten peach, we may miss out on the pumpkins or the bone broths or the soups of winter and fall. There's everything has its season. And when we can come into alignment with the season that we are in, when we can eat like a locavore, right? Where we can be locavores of our own lives and do things that are appropriate for the seasons that we're in our lives without looking back with such pain. I do this. I'm a nostalgic person. I went on a journey of my own music this past week, like listening to some tracks I hadn't heard as part of I don't know, I was kind of cleansing some of my old data off the internet. There's also, sometimes you get like these data breaches. That was my Mars Pluto experience. The square between the two was like trying to, like, anytime, in modern society, there's these data breaches. You got to change all your passwords. And it sort of brought me into alignment with some old songs that I had posted on a website that I hadn't seen in a while. And it made me feel that nostalgia and made me feel that pain of return. And I got the guitar out for an afternoon. I played guitar and it felt good. So that return it sometimes can be a good feeling. But also, then I had to return to the work that I'm doing here today and say that this is my moment right now. It's okay to return to that good memory. It's okay to have some balance in our life, but we have to pay attention to where we are in the moment as well, especially if we have responsibilities to one another. Oh yes, there we go. Javier says, when people invest a lot of time, they can't let it go. I mean, yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of hanging on in society, and you can even look at this in the regards to the political tenor that we find ourselves in. People hanging on to power, right? That's the most seductive sort of form to try to hang on to, is to try to hang on to power at all costs. And all sorts of horrific things can be done in the name of service to hanging on to thrones of power. When we get further on in our discussions, what you see in Scorpio 3, that card's called debauchery. And that's a Venus-ruled decan in Scorpio that is glamorizing that past form to the point where we'll do almost anything to keep that form alive, including increasingly evil things. So there is a point of diminishing returns that we have to learn to accept. Krista says, this is my ascendant decan. Interesting. So I wonder if you have a nostalgic bent to you, Krista. There's also themes in Scorpio too about the daimon or spirit Leto, who was a mother that was a paramour of Zeus, that was sort of pursued to the ends of the earth while she was pregnant with both Artemis and Apollo, and was given no shelter. So I've seen a lot of things where a lot of people have trouble, especially sometimes with parenting and not being able to find a restful space. Now, eventually, Leto found refuge in an island that had once been their sibling. So sometimes siblings can really help out with people in that decan. I also will say that decan sometimes foretells the birth of twins because of the associations with Artemis and Apollo. Stella Rendition is here. What's up? Stella says, happy Venus Day, folks. Nice to see you. Hope everything's going well your way, my friend. Javier says, when to talk and when to listen, when to act and when to walk away. Mars and Scorpio is making me think strategy. Hey-yo, yes, I agree. Stella says, would love to hear some of your tracks someday, Spencer. You can hear them right now if you want. You can go over to SoundCloud, Spencer Michaud Music on SoundCloud, and see some things. I also have a YouTube channel, Spencer Michaud Music. So there hasn't been a whole bunch added to it in the last few years, but it's out there if you search for it. I had a little EP that I made back in 2014 that has some story songs in it. I had a song about Philippe Petit, who was a tightrope walker that tightrope walked across the Twin Towers in the 1977. I have a song called Tightrope Walker. and a song called Guinevere, about the story of Lancelot and Guinevere, and some other things. I like writing about mythology, like writing about you know, stories. So I'm a storyteller through my music, just like I'm the storyteller here on this channel. Javier says the Sabian symbol for the moon is pretty cool. I'm digging it. Oh, you have to let us know what that's all about. Okay, let's see. Daniel Peterson is here. What's up, Daniel? Nice to see you, friend. Javier says, do I have music on Spotify? I think my album's on Spotify. I know this podcast is on Spotify, but yeah, you can check it out there too. I have my official tracks. I had just only 4 official EP tracks. I think those are on Spotify, but there's more. There's some live stuff on my YouTube channel. There's covers on. I was looking at my Reverb Nation. I don't know if you haven't heard that name in a long time, but I had some tracks on Reverb Nation that I was listening to. I used to do these Jeff Buckley tribute shows in Chicago and Toronto, and I have some Jeff Buckley tracks that I've recorded and things like that. So it's out there if you want to look for it. All right. Steven says, arrived late, but I'm here. Happy Friday. Nice to see you. Steven, hope everything's well your way. Thank you, Daniel, for being here today. It's good to see you too, friends. Okay. Javier says, that's how I found you about 2 years ago, then found you here. Nice. Yeah, it feels like a different lifetime, but I got out the guitar the other day and did some singing, and I'm happy to report that I think I've still got it, even though it's been less a part of my life regularly, but we'll see. Maybe that will be something to engage with a little bit more moving forward. I know I miss it a little bit sometimes here and there, but I love doing astrology, and I love doing these broadcasts and working with you as a teacher and as your astrologer and all of those things. So trying to find the right balance sometimes, and maybe that's part of the full moon too, is finding the balance between service for your community and your individual expression. Daniel is asking, do I do readings? I do, friend. I have a website, spencermichaud.com, where you can click on the Book Now button, and I do readings. I do natal readings. I do transit readings. I do tutoring, astrological tutoring, all sorts of stuff. So go check it out over at spencermichaud.com. Javier says, do them both on the channel, mix astrology and music. Well, we'll see. Maybe one of these days I'll get the guitar out and I'll start playing guitar and giving you the forecast at the same time. Maybe we'll try that later if you want to stick around. But I've got a few more things to get through here. So let's talk a little bit about, we talked about Mars and the liking girding. Now we haven't even looked at the chart yet. So let's bring this chart up here and you can kind of see what we're going to be looking at. So all of the things I've talked about so far, we've got the moon opposing the sun in Aries to the sun in Libra. We've, of course, got Venus here hosting the sun, and we have Mars hosting the moon, okay? So the way we're going to see this starting to unfold, right before this happens, okay? Devin says, do an Orphic hymn in the style of Jeff Buckley. You know, he did a song that was the thing that reminds me the most of an Orphic hymn that he did was called Corpus Christi Carol, where he has like a sort of does a countertenor, like a falsetto type of thing, and it reminds me of an Orphic hymn, where he's doing his falsetto voice, talking about a falcon and boring his love away. It's a really great song, right? And he was like, the falcon hath borne my maiden away. He does it all in his falsetto voice. It's beautiful. Okay. Liking girding is cool. Like that is a really interesting concept with Mars being in a similar sign that it rules with Aries and in Scorpio. So a secret line of communication between the two. Now, right before this full moon, Mercury is also going to be moving into Scorpio, right? So here is Mercury moving out of Libra into Scorpio, and Mercury is going to be a player in the next few weeks ahead because it is going to be coming into a conjunction with Mars. It's going to be squaring Pluto right as it moves into Scorpio. And we just experienced the Mars square with Scorpio this week, like Wednesday, as I'm recording this. What is today? Today is the 26th of September. Mars just squared Pluto. And we will see that echoed with Mercury squaring Pluto coming up on the 6th, the day of the full moon. So with Mercury squaring Pluto, we might get a little bit obsessed with some kind of details. We might have some obsessive thoughts. We might have some conversations that reveal some secrets. Again, like my Mars-Pluto square type of experience, a lot of it was trying to root out corruption and like data breaches from my computer and like figure out where passwords have been leaked and things like that. That's a very Scorpio Pluto type of experience. And you may see an echo of that type of energy right as we come up to the full moon. Sergey's here. What's up, Sergey? Says the full moon will trine my sun. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that'll be a big one for you. And Sergey says, I miss Buckley. I do too. Yeah, he was probably my favorite singer when I was learning how to sing and play guitar. And I just recently saw a documentary about him, which was really powerful. And I really highly recommend if you guys can find that. I can't remember the name of it. Just look up the Jeff Buckley documentary that came out. It has interviews with his mom and all sorts of cool stuff. Daniel says, friend, I want to tell you my situation in very short and want to ask your favor for if you allow. Well, you can ask a question here, Daniel. But we're going to be talking a little bit about this full moon too. So if it's a longer question that isn't more in alignment with this full moon, that may have to be another time. But if you have a quick question, I can see what I can do. So Mercury is going to square Pluto on the 7th as we see this start to unfold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this unfolding on the outer ring. So the inner ring is the full moon, that we will keep the inner ring as the full moon. And now as we see the time unfold, Mercury is going to make that square with Pluto. And then we're going to see the first aspect of the moon as it escapes from the bond. So the moon here at 2 degrees of Taurus is going to oppose Mercury and make a big T-square with Pluto. So we have Mercury and the moon making this T-square. It's oftentimes the first aspect sort of shows us how this is going to, the full moon is going to manifest. When the moon is in sort of this bonded position, under the bond, I guess that was the name for it in Hellenistic astrology. It was sort of like the manifestation energy of the moon was held in check while the moon was underneath the beams of the sun, while it was invisible underneath the beams of the sun in a new moon, and whether it was in the beams of the sun during the opposition as well. And when it starts to escape that, that's when we see the type of manifestation we might experience. So one thing that I think will be important is looking at the decans when the first aspect is made. And the moon will be in its exaltation, which I think is very positive, right? It'll be very close to its maximum degree of exaltation at about 2 to 3 degrees of Taurus. And it's in a decan that's trying to work through feelings of worry about money. And we may have some conversations where we're feeling worried about our resources. And we are trying to have these conversations about what do we need to let go of in regards to money, resources, etc. And what do we need to build upon? Are we entangled or enmeshed with other people financially? And do we need to sever some of those ties to regain our independence? Things of that nature. All of those types of themes could come to the fore. Okay. As we see this continue to unfold, we have, I'm going to go the day here, Venus opposing Saturn on the 11th. So here's Saturn, here's Venus. They are in opposition with one another on that day. And this is sort of these oppositions with Saturn have been kind of sticky the last few weeks. We had a Sun opposition with Saturn about 2 weeks ago now. And feelings of frustration. We had Mercury opposing Saturn. When we had Mercury opposing Saturn, we had the Jimmy Kimmel situation in America with the the censorship of free speech, so the blocking of something. So when we have oppositions with Saturn, sometimes there's a no, there's a barrier, there's a boundary. And sometimes it's permanent, sometimes it isn't. Maybe it's a temporary one. But with Venus opposite Saturn, Venus is in a place of its fall. When Mercury was in the opposition with Saturn, Venus was in a place of exaltation and strength. So this one might be a little bit more painful because Venus is already debilitated, and then it's going to be opposed by Saturn, which is a further debilitation of Venus's condition. Again, be careful of trying to preserve something like beauty or like your youth against the ravages of time by any means necessary. That is something to be very cognizant of. Sometimes we have to accept the aging process. And when Venus opposes Saturn, there could be a feeling like we're trying to get harmony, we're trying to harmonize something in our lives, but it's very difficult to do so with the opposition with Saturn. There's like a cosmic no that's involved with that. That brings us to our last quarter moon. So the last quarter moon is happening on the 13th. So here is the moon. It's going to be at about 20 degrees. So let's go to the quarter moon exactly here. At about 20 degrees of Cancer, opposing the 20-degree Libra sun. All right. So this is, last quarter moons generally are one of the existential crises points. When we have a first quarter moon, we're trying to bring something into existence, and there's friction involved with that. There's obstacles to overcome. When we have a last quarter moon, sometimes we're starting to change our viewpoint about something. We're trying to release something. The moon is releasing its light. And in this case, the moon is going to be in its own domicile, which I think is positive, but it's in a decan associated with scarcity versus surplus. So we may be trying to figure out how to deal with either a scarcity in our own lives, or with a surplus. And how do we embrace abundance without it taking away from someone else in our life? This is a theme that we're going to see with the moon applying to Jupiter in the third decan of Cancer. How do we create benefit, abundance, philanthropy without having it diminish somebody else? That's what Jupiter's excellent skill is in this decan, is being able to create win-win situations. When we have a malefic planet like Mars or Saturn in Cancer 3, sometimes we very much can experience the lack because of someone else's good fortune, or we can experience good fortune, but it's at someone else's expense. And that's something that we're trying to avoid with Jupiter here in this decan. So when we have the square to the sun in Libra 3 is about making adjustments, about making balances to the equilibrium, increasing that which is lacking, decreasing that which is excessive. So we're going to have to start like juggling things in a slightly different way to restore balance to a situation that might be associated with having either too much or too little. All right, let me check in with the chat here. Wondering about Chiron there. How does that work? Where's Chiron? Chiron is at Aries 3 in this chart. So with Chiron in Aries 3, I mean, Chiron's not something I necessarily use a ton in my work, but it is an asteroid that can be representative of teaching a lesson to others that we have difficulty learning ourselves. It can be a wound that feels unhealable. In Aries 3, that wound might be, how do we express ourselves charismatically? We might be afraid of expressing our charisma. We might be afraid of our sexuality. That those are themes with Aries 3 is charisma, sexual energy, being able to attract people towards your point of view. We might be afraid of our sense of humor. That's interesting, right? Right now, comedians are under attack in America. It's a wound to be funny, and there are a lot of significations with Aries 3 with using your sense of humor to win people over in a difficult situation, and that's a pain point right now for the collective. So yeah. Nice to see you, Krista. So Krista has to run. Thanks. Thank you, friend. Nice to see you. Thank you for stopping in, and hope to hear from you again soon. Javier says, I will hold off. I wrote hold off on decisions and hard day. I don't know exactly what day you're referring to since I'm on a little bit of delay, Javier, but yeah, if there are certain days that that it might not be the best time to take action, those can definitely be shown to us through astrology. Javier says all these moons are following and taking leads from the eclipses, correct? Yeah, I mean, the eclipse is a supercharged new or full moon, and they kind of set the scene for the next 6 months, and then subsequently there are meta cycles for like the next 18 years. So yeah, we will be trying to think about, like, let's say the eclipse is the title of the book, and these little moons are different chapters within that. So this is the chapter of trying to plant a new seed for passing on a legacy, potentially letting go of something because that eclipse was conjoining the South Node. And this is the chapter where we're trying to balance our own needs with the needs of somebody else, and trying to do so in a way that is maybe accepting the fact that there needs to be a change in form. Javier says, so Chiron won't affect these, or will they? I feel like it's affecting me. I think everything in the sky is affecting us on some level. I think there are things that are highlighted. I think the Chiron being co-present with the moon gives it a little bit more weight in this chart, but it's not the first thing that sticks out to me in the chart, though. Sergey says, can you elaborate a bit about the planets squaring Pluto from early Scorpio? I have natal Mars and Jupiter at 2 degrees of Scorpio, so this is a carnival of planets hitting that degree, and it keeps impacting me. Yeah, I could do that, Sergey. So first decan of Scorpio, let's just bring Scorpio back up, and we'll look back at the Scorpio card. So you can see here, and I'll take your comment down for just a minute, but this is and we'll take this banner down so we don't get confused. Okay. So this is the first decan of Scorpio, and this is where Mercury is going to be moving through to square Pluto. Mars just recently went through this decan. We may be having planets moving through a space where we are becoming aware of hungers. Okay, Austin Coppock calls it a jawbone. Hungers that have difficulty being satiated, right? Things that we desire because we see the significance through the daimon or spirit, the nymphi, that where we have difficulty getting these desires met. They were objects of desire in ancient Greek mythology. And we have to come to terms with trying to let go of some of those hungers, desires, etc. Often this decan can show us addictions that we have. Often this decan can show us forms that need to be released, and there's some grief along with that. Devin gave us a really great example earlier in the chat with the Burning Man practice of bringing offerings to the burn for the purpose of grieving and letting go. I believe Devin has a Scorpio 1 placement in his chart. He can confirm or deny that. But ritualizing our grief. Now, when those Scorpio planets are squaring Pluto, Pluto often will bring things up that are hidden, that have been repressed for a long time. They can be like a volcanic eruption. So with Mars and Pluto, it could be an eruption of anger, right? And Pluto in Aquarius 1 talks about a conflict and a defeat. It could be that decan has a lot of significations with people who are cast into exile. So we've been dealing with a lot of themes of people feeling othered or othering people through some of the immigration issues that are coming up in America, through different peoples of sexual orientations feeling othered in this period of time. There's all sorts of things where we are trying to say, this is the in crowd and this is the out crowd. We're seeing the corruption involved with that and like abuses of power in regards to those situations. So this is going to trigger, I think, a lot of grief around othering and the corruption of othering. I think it's also when Mercury makes the square, there could be eruptions of communications that are grief-filled, right? When the sun makes the square, it could be eruptions of abuses of power with the sun representing the king. So we're going to go through, think of the significations of each of the planet and what that might mean in regards to feeling grief, to identifying things that we need to let go of, or hungers that aren't being met, and then contextualize that in the othering that happens in Aquarius 1, the conflicts that we see, the feelings of defeat, maybe even the willingness to go off into the fringes of society because we don't agree with the centralized power. So all of those things can be up for discussion with these squares. All right, the 11th, okay. Javier says, I asked about the eclipses because I've heard mixed thoughts on how these lunar cycles have changed now. Now we have full moons first, so the insight now comes first type of thing. And that eclipses are put into play during the first lunation, but I've heard other thoughts on that as well. Very interesting on the SQ, on the square, okay. I will have to unpack that a little bit more in depth, Javier, as far as how all the cycles play out in order versus having the full moons and the new moons first. I'd have to look at that more and see the information as how that's unfolding to be able to make an informed comment on that. But I like where your head's at. I like being able to see all of the patterns and the recognition of patterns. I mean, that's how we do astrology, you know, and that's when I'm going to identify some patterns for you all here today. But if you are identifying certain patterns in your own life and through your own vision and intuition, trust some of that too. You know, I mean, I have certain details that I can see and keep in my head, but I don't have every single thing going on. I know that sometimes it feels or looks like I'm doing that little meme with a beautiful mind with all the little equations going at the same time. But there's some things that I miss too. All right. So we'll keep going for a minute, but before we do, this is a good time to take a little stretch. Take a stretch, stretch your legs, get a drink of water, get a little snack. We'll be here for a few more minutes. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Do me a huge favor. Sign up for the Decan Walk open house. I've got a Decan Walk starting on October the 6th, and I've got a free open house coming up on Monday, September the 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we're going to be just going over sort of our philosophy with Decan Walk. We're going to show you what being in a class is going to be like. We'll look at some charts. We will get to know one another. And we're going to do this via Zoom. So it'd be nice to put some faces with some names that we see in the chat here. So you sign up for the Decan Walk open house. I will also send you a card for a code for a free Decan webinar. That's each of my 12 Decan webinars are about 3.5 hours in length, and I go into all sorts of detail, consolidation of all of my Decanic and planetary and tarot knowledge up to that point infused into it. So you can get a free one of those. Okay. Javier says, I feel like I'm a gatherer. Got to learn to connect all the dots. Well, take Decan Walk, Javier. We'll help you connect the dots. At least what we'll do is we will show you how to apply the astrology symbols with our lived experience, which I think can be really valuable, especially as we're doing it over a long period of time. All right. So a couple other things to prepare you for this next cycle of unfolding. We talked about the last quarter moon, where we are increasing that which is lacking, decreasing that which is excessive, all in service of trying to understand what to do with scarcity versus surplus, and maybe do that in a way that is doing no harm to someone else with the conjunction with Jupiter. On the 13th as well, we will see, let's go back to this here. We're going to see Venus moving into Libra on the 13th. So you can see here that as we move forward just a day, we've got Venus in Libra on the 13th, and it immediately opposes Neptune. Now, I know it says the 14th on the screen, but just imagine that it's the 13th. So Venus improves its condition. It's going to be released from that opposition from Saturn. Maybe we have accepted something in our life that either can't be preserved against the ravages of time, or we feel a blockage that is starting, the pressure for that is starting to be released. Venus is going to move into the opposition with Neptune. So there may be some cloudy, hazy thoughts around our own needs versus the need of another. But Venus is moving into a grand air trine around that period of time. But that same day, Pluto is stationing direct. So a lot of the corruption that we have been seeing, we've been reviewing that corruption, and now we might see some actions moving forward. Remember that Pluto is also out of bounds during this month in its southern declination, which, according to this beautiful book, Persephone's Revolution by Rosie Finn. There's Rosie. Look at that. Rosie has done some excellent work understanding out of bounds Pluto and what that means for cycles of power. When Pluto is out of bounds in its northern declination, oftentimes we see the rise of authoritarianism. When we see it out of bounds in the southern declination, which it is now off and on for the next 10 years, we often see return of power to the people and to the masses, and revolutions begin. So we're in the midst of that right now. Okay, so Pluto is going to station direct at 1 degree of Aquarius, and we might see some even more of those actions starting to come out in the fold. And that's going to lead us to a Venus grand air trine, with Venus making a trine to Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius. So this is another opportunity for us, especially in the field of communication. I wish I had leaned into this a little bit more, because air signs generally talk about ideas. And when we saw the first few grand air trines, we had these planets moving into Libra 1, which identifies injustices. And we feel this righteous anger, indignation in that decan at the imbalance. And here we see this Venus is starting to smooth that over. We have the way that the order has gone with these grand air trines. Mercury went first, and Mercury asked a lot of questions about how we communicate, what the rules are around that, how we exposed corruptions in our systems. The sun went and shined a big spotlight on the injustice. And then Venus hopefully will come and start smoothing things out and say, how can we bring things together? How can we begin the process of reharmonizing? And a lot of those themes have come up again with, I think the biggest thing I've noticed with the grand air trines and with some of the oppositions with Saturn too, are all of the things we've been experiencing with free speech. And you know, we had the Jimmy Kimmel experience over the last couple of weeks, the late night talk show host, comedian in America. And it's not necessarily about him as an individual. It's about what he represents as far as government censorship, not just about a company releasing someone because they don't like what someone says, but about the government getting involved and putting pressure on that company to release someone. That's the biggest difference. And I think it's really important to make that distinction. Is it's not just about, you know, not being able to say whatever you want. There are consequences for what we say, you know, with our employers, with our community, with our neighbors, etc. But the difference with this one was it was the government that put the pressure on the company to release the person because the government didn't like what they were saying. And that is something that specifically is protected, the ability to not have that government pressure in the Constitution of the United States by the First Amendment. So this might be another poignant event or point in that discussion with the Venus grand air trine, exposing corruption, but also helping to maybe restore some of those rights. I think that's something we saw a reversal with that. Just for your information, like Kimmel's chart has the sun at 20 degrees of Scorpio. That's where Mercury is going to make its retrograde shadow, and it's going to retrograde back to that point, and Mercury is going to conjoin Mars around that degree. So he is just a vehicle for the larger conceptual issues that we are working through as a community in the United States and worldwide. Javier says, I feel like I'm a gatherer. I'm learning to collect all the dots. I should do it now so I don't forget. I'm a bit shy. Funny, I guess it follows the astrology, though, putting yourself out there. Let's see. Well, Javier, come to the open house, see if it's for you, you know, see if you resonate with it. And then if you have if you really want to participate and you either need a payment plan or just a sliding scale type of thing, we'll see if we can make it work for you. Javier says, I'm curious, are you able to narrow down a birth time? I'm curious if there's a certain placement that one can use as a distinct starting point. A birth time for just anybody or for a specific individual. If it's for like your birth time, there's a process called rectification where astrologers can look at major events in your life and try to pinpoint a rising sign or a birth time. I have some experience with that, but it's not necessarily my expertise. But yeah, that it is possible to do so. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so that's our grand air trine with Venus. And now we're coming to the 17th. We're going to go forward a few more days in our unfolding. And now we've got a square between Jupiter and the Sun. So a lot of the things that I was mentioning at the last quarter moon with the square at the last quarter moon, those themes I think are going to be echoed with the perfection of the square between Jupiter and the Sun. Generally, when we have a square between two planets, there's friction, there's tension. There is a concept in traditional astrology called being on the 10th, right? Where a planet is sort of 10 houses away from a planet and is in the overcoming square. When we have a benefic planet like Jupiter being on the 10th to the Sun, that generally is probably one of the easier squares that we can experience. Sometimes it can actually be very, very beneficial for the planet that it's contacting. So maybe there is a way when we see the square between the Sun and Jupiter to restore balance to our lives in a way that is a win-win situation that doesn't deplete anybody in the situation. We can perpetuate our own abundance without having it affect someone else negatively. And that's going to, I think, help us to move forward with grace. And a lot of that will be facilitated with the Sun in Libra 3 by becoming calm and peaceful internally and bringing that peace into whatever negotiations we're trying to navigate in our own lives. Javier says, they connect by prior big events. That makes sense. Thank you very much for all your insight and time. I appreciate it. Thanks, Javier. Yeah, I think with talking about the eclipses, that would make sense. Okay, so as I mentioned, Mercury is going to conjoin Mars on the 20th. So here is the Mercury-Mars conjunction around 19 degrees of Scorpio. Again, very close to Jimmy Kimmel's Sun, I believe. And again, he's been a vehicle for these larger concepts we've been working through as a society. So Mercury conjoining Mars in that second decan of Scorpio, there may be a discussion, a negotiation, a severing of something nostalgic from the past. Maybe we revisit something, but not necessarily to make it keep going, but to finally release it, to squeeze all the essence out of it, to squeeze all the juice out of the grapes, and then put the grapes in the compost pile. And then we have the wine, and we let the wine ferment. A really important moment, especially because this is the place where Mercury is going to be entering its retrograde shadow. Mercury is going to retrograde in November, and it's going to come all the way back to this point. So pay attention to what happens around the 20th to the 21st, because it is going to be something that we're going to need to revisit over the next few months. Now that brings us to the new moon. So this is sort of the end of our little cycle here. And we'll talk about the new moon in a subsequent broadcast, but this is a new moon in Libra 3. Now this new moon in Libra 3, again, Libra 3, if we just look very briefly at what Libra 3 is all about. Okay, here is the Four of Swords, where we're resting from strife. We're finding a truce. Maybe we've made the negotiations and we find peace. We have a spirit called Nemesis here, where we are restoring right proportion to the ups and downs and the twists and turns of fate. We have some really fortunate fixed stars, especially Spica at 24 degrees of Libra. So that's one that can bring a lot of benefit. That's why that square between the Sun and Jupiter, I'm not too worried about that one, because the Sun's on Spica, a really positive fixed star, and Jupiter is in the overcoming square in its exaltation. This new moon is about restoring balance, restoring peace, being able to become centered and clear by bringing your own balance to a situation, maybe restoring peace to chaos through your own energy, rather than needing every external environment to be perfectly balanced. you bring the balance to the situation. Okay. The other thing just to keep in mind with this particular new moon that's coming is it's hosted by Venus in Libra, so powerful Venus in its own domicile, and it's on a fixed star called Diadem, and that is one that is talking about making a sacrifice for the family. Diadem was in a constellation Coma Berenices, which talks about a Queen Berenices, that sacrificed her hair for the return, safe return of her husband from war. So this is to restore equilibrium and balance. We may need to make a sacrifice for our family, for our community, for something of that nature. So that's just something that is coming along the way on the 21st. And then finally, Neptune is going to retrograde into Pisces around that period of time on the 22nd. So you can see now that's going to come into alignment with that grand water trine with Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and then Mercury and Mars. And Sun will move into Scorpio. So Sun's going to be moving into that grand water trine position as well. So probably some emotional times, but flowing aspects. I think Jupiter's really going to help smooth out the process of letting go of old forms and smooth out our feelings of responsibility towards one another. I think it could be a really fortunate time for a lot of people, especially if you have some placements in water signs. Okay. That's how this full moon is going to unfold. Just going back to the chat, just checking in with all of your comments. Let's see. Javier says, interesting. Starting in Aries, the self, then ending in Libra, balance. So self-balance. Yeah, I think, inner negotiations with other people, Javier, with the Sun in Libra, we kind of need to know who and what we are and what we stand for so that we can bring an equal, unified whole to the negotiation. So I often think about in relationships, it's not necessarily half a person and half a person equals a whole person. It's one whole person and another whole person equals two people in relationship. And I think that's really the gist of this full moon is how do we get clear about who we are so that we can be better partners in relationships with one another, whether it's romantic relationships, family relationships, business relationships. You got to know who you are and what you stand for so that you can bring that to the exchange. It doesn't mean you run roughshod over other people. It means that you negotiate from a place of your own integrity, right? And you have boundaries. When you're in a negotiation, there's certain lines sometimes that we have that we don't want other people to trample, right? So we'll see that in the hexagram that comes up. Sergey says, what do you make of all the grand trines happening nowadays? Feels like minor grand trines, kites and grand trines happening all over and over. Cradle next summer too. Oh, well, I saw my good friend Sam Reynolds talk about trines and grand trines on social media recently. And I love Sam Reynolds. Go check him out. I believe Unlock Astrology is his official thing. And he was talking about just sometimes things, they work smoother, and that can be a good thing on one level. On another level, sometimes the growth that we experience comes from having challenging aspects in our charts or in the transits that we experience, like squares and oppositions. Sometimes if we have too many flowing aspects, we don't necessarily have to work that hard to get where we are. This is something that I think is really important to remember when we are talking about a natal chart that has a lot of squares or oppositions or ill-dignified planets. You might be like, oh, I wish I had all these trines. But sometimes people with too many trines in their chart, life just kind of hands them things and they don't necessarily have to grow through it. So I would say that in the positive way of looking at the grand water trine, the grand air trine, is things might function more smoothly in our own lives and in our relationships with others. On the downside, when things are flowing so smoothly, we might take that for granted, and we might not be growing in the way that friction and conflict sometimes forces us to grow. So I think the way to deal with those grand trines is appreciate when things are flowing smoothly, Don't take it for granted, but also do the work necessary to continue to grow during those periods of time. If you're able to make more progress easier, I guess maybe take your time with it so that you don't get in over your head, but also understand that there are lessons to be learned from good times as well as the challenging times as well. Javier says, okay, well said. Looking forward to the water trines coming up. I am too, actually. I know it's going to be an emotional time, but I think it'll be smoother, hopefully. Hopefully it'll be smoother. Again, friends, there's going to be always a combination of difficult transits, smooth transits. It's all a symphony of the cosmos, the music of the spheres. And if we get too fixated on one part of it without contextualizing it with the rest of the instruments that are going and playing at the same time, we're not really getting the full picture. Like, let's say, for example, I've been listening. I want to turn you on to an artist that I'm sort of late to the party to, but that's okay. I don't know how we've come to music these days without listening to the radio or whatever, but an artist I've been really into lately, her name is Santi Gold, I believe. It's a stage name for Santi White. And she was really like much more popular between 2008 and 2014 or so. But there's this song, Disparate Youth, is just my jam. I could just listen to that song over and over and over again. But it's not the only song that she has that's great. But it's really, there's a lot of really unexpected twists and turns to her music. It's very diverse. There's a lot of different influences and genres that are blended within it. And if you took each of those elements of a Santi Gold song and you separated it out, it might sound very discordant. But when they come together, man, when the beat is the foundation for all of it, the heartbeat, it becomes incredible. And sometimes when you're listening to new music that is unique and that is really forward thinking, the first time you hear it, you could be like, oh, that's weird. I don't quite understand that yet. But then eventually those things that become the discordant parts that you heard at first become the things that make it great. So the same thing with things in the sky. If you try to separate everything out, and we do our best here to be as integrative as possible, we do have to understand the individual parts. When you're composing music, you have to understand what the individual instrument's role is going to play. But then when you hear it all together, it just flows. So understand the individual parts, but then see it within context of everything else. Javier says, balance work versus trines. I like it. Never thought people having a lot of trines in their charts. Yeah, sometimes just having a lot of trines or dignity in your chart doesn't necessarily mean that you have a good character. It just means that maybe life is a little bit easier for you on some levels. Just the same way as if you have a bunch of squares and oppositions or ill-dignified planets doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that sometimes you got to work a little bit harder for it. Devin says, it's been great to see judicial rulings since Saturn moved back into Pisces with Jupiter in its best dignity since 2023. Example, Cop City RICO trial might be dissolved. Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, seeing some justice potentially coming back and maybe return of some power to the people with Pluto out of bounds too. But Jupiter often represents legal proceedings, and having Jupiter being in a good spot, I could definitely see some of those things being smoothed out. So looking forward to the unfoldings of that. All right. So we do have a hexagram for the day to get us through for this full moon. And this hexagram is number 10, which translates to treading. Okay, and I'll talk about that in a second. All right, so here we go. Hexagram number 10 is translating to treading, but treading on the tail of the tiger, which is interesting. It represents conduct, circumspection, treading carefully, stepping on the tiger's tail. Okay. Jack Balkin, in his wonderful book, The Laws of Change, says the theme of hexagram number 10 is the need for care and circumspection in conduct and social interaction. You find yourself in a difficult situation. It is like treading on the tail of a tiger. If you make a wrong move, you may bring strong forces down upon you. Therefore, it is important to behave with the utmost delicacy and decorum. Plan your moves in advance. Think carefully what you want to do before you act. Move towards your goal steadily and avoid rash behavior. Remember, we have a fixed star that's associated with speediness and rashness. So this is encouraging us to think before we do or before we speak or act. Move towards your goal steadily and avoid rash behavior. This is not the time to engage in reckless adventures or radical approaches. Stick to traditional, tested, and proven methods. In personal relationships, be pleasant and tactful. Libra qualities, right? Particularly to difficult people who might have reason to harm you. Don't allow their irritability and bad temper to throw you or cause you to respond sarcastically or in anger. Maintain your poise and composure. Even though your position is perilous, you can still make progress if you behave with the utmost tact and consideration during this difficult time. Don't forget your sense of humor or your manners. They will help you avoid potential problems and smooth over misunderstandings. Above all, do not lose your cool. Doing the right thing now requires that you keep your wits about you. Imagine yourself working along a balance beam. If you keep your balance emotionally as well as physically and move forward with grace and dexterity, you will get to the other side unharmed. I mean, there's so many things about that that speak to a full moon in Aries with the sun in Libra opposing. The need for balance, the need for harmony, the need for maintaining our composure so we don't let anger lead the way. So important in these times, especially when we're trying to deal with expressing ourselves in a time where the powers that be would love nothing more than to silence certain voices or to put people on a list or something of that nature. I've seen all these little things on threads now of like warning signs about people being on part of an organization or something due to their comments. And we're living in some strange times, friends. Some of the things that we may have taken for granted about being able to say whatever, whenever we want, I don't think we should take those things for granted. We saw in this past week some real challenges to those freedoms, rights, etc. That doesn't mean that we capitulate to the oppression. It just means that we have to be strategic about these things. We have to think carefully through our actions before we fire something off. I think that's just a good way of approaching challenging circumstances in general. If we are chaotic in our actions, the effectiveness of our actions is probably not going to be as poignant as if we composed ourselves. Think about Mars and Scorpio. The way Mars and Scorpio is engaging in combat is very strategic. Scorpio Mars is defending a dying life force. And it because it is not at its strongest vitality, it has to be very strategic, like a ninja, or like that scorpion that is stinging you with one death strike rather than like combating like a berserker. Like that would be the Aries energy, right? It doesn't have that much energy and strength. It has to be very specific about how it engages in conflict. And I think that's really good advice for how we need to move forward with all of this. If we go through things chaotically, unconsidered, we can actually start causing more damage and, alert ourselves to like forces that would bring that hammer down a lot harder. If we're strategic about these things, if we, push back in ways that are effective rather than chaotic. Here's an example. When we're dealing with free speech challenges in America, I truly believe that the way that Disney, the company Disney, and reversed its course of canceling Jimmy Kimmel on its ABC affiliates was because people started to boycott Disney Plus and Hulu and cancel their subscriptions. That is an example of a pinpointed action that was well thought out, because when you are trying to stand up to corporate oligarchy, the only language they understand is money. And if you hurt them where they are most vulnerable, the pocketbook, that's when they start to listen. I mean, that is the most effective way of resistance in these times, when you have government systems that are awash in greed and are only paying attention to profit over people. And they reversed course because they saw so many people starting to cancel their subscriptions that was an effective action. There are other actions that aren't effective in these times that are just a waste of our energy. So I think that this is telling us to be effective in our actions, we have to be composed. We have to think about what is actually going to create change versus what's just going to exhaust us. And then we have to tread carefully and make sure that those actions are done with a collective force, a collective movement, etc. Yeah, Devin's got it. Scorpio Mars considers the cost of conflict. Absolutely. So, just firing off some ill-conceived comment on social media, there might be a cost to that. You might get on some bullshit list or something, rather than taking an action, maybe even covertly. You don't have to announce necessarily that you canceled your Disney Plus subscription, although many people did, and that made other people feel empowered to do so. You just do it, and that really hits people exactly where they're vulnerable in the pocketbook. So there will probably need to be more of these types of things moving forward, more boycotts, more protests through voting with our dollars that I think will be able to move the tide towards re-empowering people and protecting our rights moving forward. Javier says, wow, this hexagram is right on time. See the good in others and don't let things separate us. Yes, I agree. All these things separate us again. So silly. It's true. There's a lot of things a lot of forces in the world right now that are would love nothing more than to separate us out into factions and sides. And it's exhausting to hearing about it. We all live on a planet. It's called Earth. We're all Earthlings. Find some solace in that, even when you disagree with people. Gaia is everyone's mother on this planet, even the people we don't agree with. Javier says, you're right, Spencer, just do it. The people who publish it and then get angry at others who don't. Yeah, this is a thing. I've experienced this myself. There's actions that I've taken that people don't know anything about to restore justice in various situations in my life. And it's not an airport. I don't need to announce my arrivals or my departures. And that's true when we're doing some of these things too. Although I will say, there are certain things that if you share that you are pushing back, and you share it just in a calm, reasonable way, that can inspire others to do the same. So there are times when it's appropriate, but there are times when it's not. And you just take the action and you don't necessarily need the performative credit for it. This is something that I sometimes will get a little bit, I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of performative justice, I guess. I prefer things that actually get the job done. All right. So we do have an animal as well. Okay. And if you like the hexagram, you'll love this one for an Aries full moon. It's the sloth. Look at that guy. Oh, what a perfect counterbalance to the energy of an Alpharet's fixed star full moon in Aries. The sloth is saying, hey, slow down. Take your time. Think things through. You don't necessarily have to act so rashly. Sloths are amazing animals as far as being able to move at their own pace, to be able to protect themselves, actually. See those big claws? People think that sloths can't really protect themselves due to how slow that they move, but they're actually very capable of protecting themselves, which I didn't know about them, and I think that's really cool. So we can protect ourselves, and it doesn't have to look like a rash type of blustery, boisterous experience. We can protect ourselves through power in numbers, through speaking truth to power, through voting with our dollars. We can slow down so that we can make wise decisions based on composure rather than based on just the emotional things that come up that could lead to irrational actions. Okay, so I think that having a healthy balance between understanding the needs of ourselves as individuals, the needs of people in collective, slowing down so we can take our time to enjoy the process of life, right? Having a sense of humor about these things. Look at the smile on that sloth's face. He's just loving life, hanging from a tree, hanging out. He knows that everything's going to happen in due time. And that really, is there any hurry in going where we're going? John Lennon had a really great song. Just it's called "Watching the World Wheels Go Round." He was like, "I'm just watching the wheels go round. I'm just sitting here doing time." Sometimes it feels like that in life, and we can enjoy the scenery even in times of great challenge, of great I don't know, discord. We can become revolutionaries by having a sense of humor, by pushing back through our humor, by slowing down and enjoying the good things in life, as well as resisting the things that exploit other people and ourselves. So a great look at this beautiful face. I'm just so happy with this image of how satisfied he looks. He's just like, you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to hang out for a little bit. And I think it's a great message for this full moon. Javier says, yes. She's resonating with the sloth. She says, aliens turn us all into sloths. We would never fight. Aliens should turn us all into sloths. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. See how it all works out. All right, my friends. I think that's what I've got for you for today. Do me a huge favor. Go over to find me on social media at Spencer Michaud, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, etc. Follow me over there. Go to spencermichaud.com. If you want to sign up for a reading or sign up for the Decan Walk or the Decan Walk open house, I would love to see you at the open house. That would be amazing. Get that Decan Walk open house this upcoming Monday, the September the 29th, 2 p.m. Eastern time. That's the time that class will meet. So if you can make the open house, hopefully that'll mean that you can make the Decan Walk. That starts on October the 6th. I would love to have you sign up. Reach out if you need financial assistance with a payment plan, or even if there's something where you're like, I can only afford to do this for this period of time, just reach out. We'll figure something out. If it truly speaks to you and you think that this is something that you'd like to do with us, I want it to be accessible to you. All right. So that's what I've got for you. Thank you, friends. Thank you, everyone who has been commenting in the chat here today. Thank you, everyone who's been sharing their wisdom with us. Slow down. Take a few deep breaths. It's okay to return to something in your past for a little while, but don't get stuck there. And take the actions that will have the most effect. They don't necessarily have to be loud or boisterous or out front. They can be small actions behind the scenes, right? And try to come from big love and kindness. Those are the things, those are the truly revolutionary acts in these times, is trying to be kind to one another, trying to find win-win situations, trying to bridge the gaps between people rather than create more of a gulf between one another. And hopefully we will see some of those wounds starting and those traumas starting to be healed between all of us that share this beautiful planet. So be kind to yourself, be kind to one another, and I will see you all the next time. Take care. Peace.